Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant. Alas, it is the time of year when I take a brief break to hibernate and work on personal projects that I simply cannot manage while putting out content on the channel. My own book, etc. Still wrestling with that one. Hence, here is a collection of some of the stories sent out this year to tide you over. I expect this to be a big year for both myself and the channel, so do please forgive me this period of respite before the oncoming storm. And so, let us be about it. From the Bald Library, Bitter Tears. Story continued from Triumvirate of Terror playlist. The time, the scouring, the place, the battle barge, merciless marauder. In his personal quarters, Praetor Tarax Antarax stood before the vidscreen's dying light. He had not moved, repositioned, nor shuffled during the entire communication. Not one muscle in his body, not one in his face. He had blinked but the once when the light had sparked into existence. He had glared all throughout it at the poor soul that had imparted the message. He did so quickly, economically. No embellishment nor sugar-coating. They were both praetors, both iron warriors of old Terran stock. They were iron. So they had not bandied words. If it were anyone else, they would most likely feel snubbed, chastened, discarded. Of course, this was the intent. For most of his rank and position, to be forced to impart this information to the men under him would be a calculated humiliation. And it was calculated all right. But Tarax Antarax had been ready for something, because he had already made his plans pretty clear. The ships and marines under his command had skirted the main fleet and moved off slightly. Oh, they had dug in and fought for every inch of space and ground when they believed they could punish the loyalist lackeys. Antarax had made the scouring a living hell for many a loyalist attacking force. Yet, he had not asked for reinforcements, equipment, or even ships from the Primarch. Barely acknowledged vague orders. The warp was turbulent. All knew this. Since the breaking of the Siege of Terror, things had not gone their way as they did when Horus was around. And Perturabo, the Primarch, he fought like a cornered bear, but he never cared one whit for any of his men. All knew they could and would be sacrificed just to bleed the enemy, especially if said enemy were the Seventh, Dawn and his sons. There was no victory to be had from the Lord of Iron. All knew it, yet few acted upon it. The Lion, the Khan, the Wolf, Dawn, Corax, Vulcan, some remains of the Angels and the Tenth, all but Gilliman and the Ultramarines hunted the leaderless, desperate, and scattered traitor legions. Fulgrim, Angron, Mortarion, Magnus, all had disappeared into the warp, leaving their legions to run and hide, alone. The noose was closing. All that remained of the Imperium, now terrible in their retribution against those who had sided with the War Master. So Tarax Antarax had seen the writing on the wall. A lowly sergeant when the Emperor led them into battle. He had no love of his Primarch outside that obliged by his genetics, which, with the will of Antarax, this meant next to none at all. He had manoeuvred his flotilla away to the very edges of accepted range. To any but himself and the Primarch, he would still look the loyal, obedient soldier. But they both knew Antarax was preparing to go rogue. So, this decision, this slight, had been understandable. Tarax Antarax looked at the dead screen and breathed in slowly and deeply. His Terminator-armored gauntlets squealed slightly as metal rubbed on metal, as he clenched and unclenched his fist. A vein in his neck was pulsing, his brows furrowed in their usual way, but knotted so tightly that a bolt round would bounce off them. He nodded to himself, then marched to the command deck. He never shuffled, wandered, ran, nor charged. Anthrax marched everywhere, always flanked or trailed by his honor guard. Assassination attempts or challenges were almost unheard of, but that almost was all important. He led his small entourage to the command deck, and there imparted the news to his men, all of them. They had missed the party. More to put it, they had not even been invited. While the majority of the Iron Warriors had been mustered to punish the Imperial Fists at the Iron Cage, they, Tarax Anthrax's men, had been overlooked. At the end of his proclamation, a silence descended that was so total that it left all hearing their own heartbeats. All remembered how Tarax Anthrax had been as cold as ice when the order was given to retreat from Terra, to quit the siege. And this was his most dangerous state. Where Hexamel or Ullik may have raged or spat, Tarax never showed his ire in word or affectation. He acted. Hence, all present waited to see what or who would bear the fruits of his cold rage. Yet, he did not finish there. He declared that the army was self-contained, and had been so for many years now. He reminded all of them how they had ever been a fraternity unto themselves. When had they ever pleaded for assistance? When had they begged or borrowed equipment, resources, or even manpower? Or even seed? Tarax was correct, and all there knew it. They had Mechanicum ships with them, fully functioning production lines, apothecaries capable of replenishing their manpower. After the Dropsite massacre, they had been rich in gene seed indeed. They had raided and acquired, building, not depleting their forces, over all of the time of the heresy. Their prayer to Tarax Anthrax had been unbelievably firm, but he had most often been fair as well, and few could say that. Never a charismatic man, he had ruled through iron discipline and an inbuilt fear of him, earned over few but very publicized executions and duels. Tarax was solid. He was fury, and he brought victory. Never having to prove himself to any, never wishing to supplicate himself to the Primarch, despite the natural inclination of all Astartes to serve their father without question. Some quietly whispered if Tarax Anthrax even considered himself an Iron Warrior any longer, or if he ever had. But none would trade his leadership for that of a praetor close to the eye of Perturabo, for in those outfits, casualties were extreme and rewards were slight, if they came at all. Better for the eye of the Primarch to pass them over. They always got the job done, no matter its genesis, no matter its difficulty. They always won out in the end. So, in a strange way, many of his men were now unshakably loyal. Better the devil you know. Certainly better than the greater devil, the Lord of Iron, Perturabo. So, when Tarax Anthrax declared that he had accepted a new mission, none questioned. When he ordered all communications from the Primarch and Greater Legion to be ignored, as they would be geists of the Immaterium, or enemy communications designed to take them off course, none questioned that either. His address over, he turned to the startled deck officers. They were startled by the speech, but not shocked. Anyone with an ounce of brain left in their heads knew this was no order from their overlord. It was the excuse. Tarax was going rogue, and nearly all were on board with the action. As for the greater, so for the lesser. The lesson of Istvan III was not missed by Tarax and Tarax. Any who were not wholeheartedly behind this defection were swiftly identified. Those squads that held for the Primarch were soon used up in bloody attacks, and the few strange officers too high up to be expended in conflict were slain in direct actions from the Praetor. Oh, some warlords might have made them disappear, taken in the night without ceremony or even acknowledgement that they were gone. This was not the way of Tarax and Tarax. He did it all publicly, swiftly, and brutally. His men knew where he stood, so he knew where they stood, behind him or against him, and the latter was a death sentence. Addressing the deck crew, Praetor Anthrax then calmly asked, "How many cowardly scum do we have left?" All looked down at their screens or printouts. They knew what he meant immediately. Space Marines they had captured in battle. It was always difficult to take them alive. They cost dearly, but it was a challenge set the inductii. Praetor Anthrax demanded that any inductii had to capture a full Marine to be granted this rank in turn. So many more had been taken than near any other formation in the traitor ranks. Yet the answer was not going to be to his liking, and all knew it. They shiftily darted looks to the Centurion. Paravus, he knew he had to answer, but it might be the last thing he did. But he did it. "None, my lord. Last dozen took their own lives." The Praetor turned and pinned the Centurion with his glare. "Have the idiot in charge of the pens executed." Paravus nodded and gestured to a lieutenant, who then marched from the bridge with breacher unit in tow. The Praetor stated coldly, "Our mission must be sanctified in victory. Find me a target, Paravus, now." The Centurion saluted, and his hands then danced across his screen. After a mere minute, he brought his display up onto the main screen, so he could explain. "Here, my lord, the Placidius system. A single world, a single conurbation. But there are issues." The Praetor merely raised an eyebrow at him. "We have 3 Imperial fleets within strike range. If the governor of Placidius is effective, then he will alert the Loyalists as soon as we translate into real space. Then we may have only days before one of the scouring fleets moves to meet us. We could get pinned to the world. The Loyalist scum are in numbers it would be challenging for us to contend with. Impossible to survive for any but you, Lord Cudgel." Anthrax sneered. "I have already cleaned my arse today, Paravus. Get your tongue out of it." Paravus nodded, but said nothing. "Defences of the city?" spat Anthrax. "Overlapping void shields. They repulsed an attack of the 14th some 5 years ago, when we originally moved through this sector. They were deemed unworthy of further assault. They have little importance in either position or properties, so Mortarion and his legion simply flew straight by them." "More's the better. We shall see if Iron Warriors can do what they could not." Paravus spoke calmly but lowly, audible but little above a whisper. "My lord, we will only get a day or 2 at most." Anthrax then looked at him and grinned. It was a terrifying sight, one seen perhaps once a decade. Mass with mirth. A rare display indeed from this Marine. "Call down to the armory. Have them prepare my personal squadron." Paravus's eyes narrowed as he too leered and then sent the order down to the armory. This was going to be most entertaining. Days later, the denizens of Placidius 6 looked out across the plain to see the Iron Warrior landers touch down. So few. Was this some form of joke? Well, the traitors were about to learn the same lesson taught to the Death Guard. Citadel Primus was not going to be easy pickings. These fools would join their cousins as festering dead before the wars of the city. A mere score of heavy vehicles came at them, kicking up dust and masking their approach with a barrage from a score of manticores and medusas, their shots pluming on the shields, distracting those within. Yet still, all inside could tell that these were land raiders approaching. As soon as they were within range of the outer defences, they opened up. Lance cannon shots twinkled as the concentrated light slammed through the air and attempted to punch straight through the lead vehicles. Yet only one or two were destroyed. As a line of tanks came on, the defenders became more frantic. Volleys came out faster, but less accurately. There was massed confusion. The very same defensive weapons had slaughtered the land raiders of the 14th, burned through them like paper. How? Why? Nothing seemed to stop the oncoming weapons of war. Then they saw it. As the tanks were now clear as day, so close were they, the defenders watched on dolefully as their firepower was stopped by shimmering shields of energy to the fore of the tanks. These were no normal land raiders. Extended longer, many had huge cannons at their front. The las cannon fire was being absorbed by what could only be flare shields. The oncoming enemy had not even fired back once. But now they closed and slowed. A second rank of Vindicators powered forward to support the Land Raider variants, and as one, they all fired. The shells coming from these Land Raider variants slammed into the Void Shields, tearing them down in the one volley. The Vindicators then opened up and pummeled the walls, stripping them of their own defences. The second volley from the Land Raiders then saw entire segments explode backwards, or smashed to pieces. Other variants of Land Raiders, no lesser in size, but without the cannons on the front, then ploughed into the gaps, and assault ramps lowered, and outpoured hundreds of Iron Warriors directly into the city. The troop carriers were Spartans, of course. The two destroyers were Tarax Antarax's own Typhon Squadron. In he marched, taking his personal Terminator guard and Ossus the Unmaker. And over the next day, the Citadel was denuded of all life. Tarax then ordered the Typhons into the city walls, and they laid the place low. Not one stone was left on top of another by day's end. When Tarax Antarax finally came back to the merciless marauder, Centurion Paravus was the only one to ask the question that burned in every mind that witnessed his attack. But luckily for Paravus, he did so in private. "I do not question you, my lord. I merely wish to learn. The annihilation of the Citadel. Why, my lord? They were only humans. No threat to us, with ammunition so precious. Why?" The Praetor looked at him coldly, seeming to weigh up if he would respond with words or his power maul. But words won out. "No, Paravus. They were not just humans. They were Imperial subjects. I want whoever finds them to know one thing." And Paravus retorted, "What would that be, my lord Antarax?" "That the war isn't over. While I live, it will never be over." The fleet was considerable for a Traitor Legion formation, but not anything more than what would have once been called a flotilla back in the days of the Great Crusade. Compared to an expedition fleet, it was limited, small, and quite badly damaged. This fleet had been forced away from the Greater Legion in a frantic firefight some months ago. When everyone else had jumped, this group had waited a second or two too long, and they had been cast adrift in the warp, severed from the greater order. Yet this was to play into the hands of its master, the Praetor of Pain, Ullik the Unreasonable. Long had he chafed at the orders of the others. Long had he looked for such an escape from the greater cloud of ships that was the Death Guard fleet. And when they were blurted back out into real space, he made no attempt to rejoin the whole. Yet things were dire. The Loyalist forces had harried them remorselessly, followed them wherever they went. Never more than a jump or two behind, they dogged every step of the headlong retreat away from the homeworld terror. The scum had dubbed the campaign the Scouring, so, as to form, Ullik had made them regret every encounter. Where others automatically turned and fled, he would weigh the odds and the relative experience of his adversaries if it was known. Yet in those days, at that time, the identification of every ship was still known to the Astartes, so very good guess could be made as to the potence and professionalism of any fleet that they encountered. Where the enemy were battle-hardened and had insurmountable odds in their favour, Ullik would flee. Where they were green, idiotic, or close in numbers, Ullik had turned, laid traps and feints, and bitterly punished the Loyalist dogs. Yet the constant warfare had taken its toll. Many of the vessels required light to medium repairs. Some were barely operational. There was no opportunity, no port in a storm that would provide them succor. Hence they had trudged on, forever retreating, as much as it galled all on board worth their salt. The heresy had failed. Horus had failed. And the vengeful sons of the Emperor that remained had come with fire and wrath. Backed by the resources of the vestigial Imperium, at least they could repair, resupply, and refit their ships and armories. Not so the Marines who had dared to raise arms against said Emperor. All was in ashes, all was lost. Now it was merely a matter of time, and all had known it. Or at least they had thought it often, in secret to themselves. None would countenance raising such a pathetic vision of the future before their peers, let alone their superiors, and none at all even breathed the word in Ullik's presence, that word that hung over them all like a sword of Damocles, an ever-present whisper just out of earshot. Defeat. Ullik had kept them together, maintained morale as best he could. So many were now witnessing a shift in his fundamental makeup. His name, his true name, the Unreasonable One. This had always been true. He had earned it, constantly refreshed its pertinence. Yet now, as time went by, he was changing. Some said it was a growing affinity with the dark powers. Some said that he had already given up and was merely enjoying the moment, every second of every day, knowing that one of them would be his last. There were reports from those who had attended his chambers that he could be heard to give off long, low belly laughs to himself whenever none were present. All avoided his chosen, his elite bodyguard, for any of those would strike down a brother as much as a serf if there was even an intimation that insult had been given to Ullik. The hint of this alone had ended more Marines than any were comfortable with. But this was as it should be. He was their lord. If anyone could steer them through this horror, then it was, unquestionably, Ullik. But the change, it was his demeanour. He was become more avuncular and cheerier as things went on, no longer scowling at all he passed, any who gained his attention. He now flashed playful smiles to those he met, even if it was just in his eyes. Some thought this a suicidal slip in his reality. Some said he was losing his grip. but the far greater percentage of those who knew, ever encountered their lord regularly, felt him transforming into a fatherly figure. Odd indeed. One that all feared when an error had happened, to which he dealt with in his customary brutal efficiency. No quarter was ever given to incompetence. It was known. But to those who acted well, performed under pressure, he was now able to give them an approving nod, that glint in his eye ever present for those who did their duty. The few remaining astropaths in the ship had received messages regularly. Some said that Ullik was ignoring mustering orders and coordinates. Others that he was in close contact with his brethren of the three, the Triumvirate. He, Hexamon, and Tarax Antarax. But none could be sure, and he was certainly not saying anything. Finally, it was blatant for all to see. The Astartes fleets, who had once flown under the banner of Lupercal, were now headed in the one direction. Like rats fleeing to the one place of safety, they were headed for a spatial anomaly to the east. The Eye of Terror, some called it. But this seemed excessively dramatic for a bland place out in the region once dominated by the detested Eldar. But this turned out to be a mistake of astonishing naivety, for it was indeed a place of horror. With a final look back into the galaxy, Ullik gave the order to proceed into the maelstrom of frantic empiric storms. No matter what, the Loyalist forces would not follow them in here. Some thought it would be better to go down fighting the dogs than to take such an obviously life-ending course of action. But still, none raised objections when it came to it, and in they went. And it turned out the place was aptly named. Entire segments of space were alight with spectral flames. Planets were either barren hellholes, utterly unable to support life, or infested with warp entities large and small. There seemed to be little life out here, and even less a chance of finding a way to survive. But this was not the worst of it. Oh no. That was the regular and frequent events. The Caxons went off again as another such event began. Ullik was in his chambers as it began, the deck officers raising the alert and summoning him to the bridge. Another attack had begun. Ullik rose from his chair, languidly stretched, and walked to his personal armory. He now made sure that he was not separated by even a short corridor from his arming chamber, and he rarely, if ever, took off his tactical dreadnought armor. Where once he had looked forward to getting out of it, now he lived in it. Not just for protection, nor the improved senses and strength it provided, but out of the simple realization that it was more comfortable than ever, and he really had no reason to remove it. Even less now that he had inscribed glyphs and wards inside it, offering him not only greater defense against harm, but also a sense of ownership. It felt far more like a second skin than ever before. And so, he strode the half-dozen paces to his armory, and to the one weapon he prized most in these events. Ah, how he adored his etheric shock maul. Although he usually preferred his weapons of old, nor would ever admit to Tarax that he used a maul under any circumstances. This was the perfect tool for this particular job. Taken from the lifeless gauntlet of a Loyalist nullificator, it was made for this. Ullik wheeled and made for the exit, his men waiting for him in the corridor, each one armored similarly to himself, their thunderhammers already pulsing with sheaths of power. They marched to the closest open region of the ship, the doors opening to now all too familiar sight. Serfs and servitors were being heaped into great columns, as warp-spawned things cavorted and eviscerated anything within their grasp. Lethality walking. The monsters were more than a match for any of his mortal crewmen. Ullik smiled and gave the order, and led his men forward at a run. Their heavy Terminator armor slamming into the deck, making it resound like a stampede of metal groks. And then he was amongst them. Pink things with claws for hands, long lithe beings that danced like Eldar. And he laid into them with the Aethershock maul. Each swing of it lit up the being it struck, where normal bolter rounds or bayonets barely pierced their skin. His maul smashed them into a pulp. Like any Volkite weapon, it gave off a discharge that burned as much as it broke with its impact. The incursion lasted a full day. No respite was afforded any, as warp beings appeared across the ship time and again. Yet Ullik and his guard made short work of so many. He was everywhere. Despite this, the casualties of baseline humans was eye-watering. Even some squads of Astartes had been torn to shreds. Finally, it slowed, then ceased. They would come again. Sometimes pink and swift, like this attack. Sometimes blue and burning. Sometimes red and berserk. But they always came. Yes, this place had been appropriately named. It was indeed the Eye of Terror. From the Bald Library. Hunger. The planet Kazorkin was a test on the minds of even their new Astartes masters. The land shifted, not slowly like the undulation of sand dunes in the night, but dramatically and instantly. A blink of the eye and the viewer could see an entirely new vista, an utterly altered panoramic. Hues changed, colors collided to make combinations that had never been seen by the human eye, where words had a taste and feelings a temperature, where the only constant was change. The structures of this place remained static, only due to the words and wonders performed by the word-bearer sorcerers, who daubed each block, each tower, each pot cutlass with glyphs and wards. Yet, one night a citadel stood at the highest peak of the hemisphere, only to reside at the bottom of a cavernous ravine at dawn. The wailing of the slaves attached to the bulwarks by 8 iron nails gave off a constant ululation that drove those in the pens mad. When viewed at a distance, their writhing gave the impression that the very walls moved. The word-bearer apostle looked down from this catastrophe of an edifice and sniffed in displeasure. He despised any interruption from his great works, let alone an embassage from his cousins. Who were they to him? Not even the blood in their veins was the same. They did not worship the Four Undivided. They did not see the magnificence of the whole, the beauty in its disjointed but unified vision. These ones wore the purple. They thought themselves so regal, yet they were fools, mono-worshippers of the Prince of Pleasure. Yes, there was truth in abundance in the laws and word of this Lord, this God. But to hear only one song was to ignore the cadence and enlightenment of the others. Pretty things they were, marching in unison, as if the legions were still untouched by the individuality blessed to them by the discovery of the truth. The worship of God so much greater than the self-professed master of mankind. Inevitably, they still pretended nothing had changed. And now the apostle sneered. He would have to come down to his halls in mere moments, have to treat with these ignorant scum as equals, at least on the surface. For there are quite a few of them here, and their lord, Hexamon, was not to be trifled with, or so most said. For all knew he had the love of the god Slanesh. It was writ all over his very form, but he also had friends of consequence. At least, that was the rumour amongst the bearers of the word. The apostle spat and moved to his throne room. He stalked up the stairs to his seat of power and sat upon it before the doors opened. The purple-clad Emperor's children marched in, 2 lines a score apiece, forming a corridor of warplate amidst which this diplomat walked, head held high, face impassive. Oh, but he was a pretty one. The high cheeks of the Phoenician, the white hair of their kind, the subtle yet telling tranquility of one who feels immortal, invulnerable, a prince amongst paupers. The word-bearer did not rise as Hexamon approached, but he leaned forward, as this brother-in-arms did not halt, did not hesitate a second, as his foot landed on the first step, and Hexamon ascended. The 30 word-bearers on either side of the cordon of children shifted. Hands went to bolter and blade. The children turned, and instead of facing the throne, they now pivoted to line themselves against the surrounding word-bearers. Hexamon drawled as he walked up the steps to the throne. "Well met, cousin of Lorgar. We see that you are positively awash with chattels. Rich indeed." When this man showed no sign of stopping, the apostle finally stood, his right hand resting on his power sword, left hand resting on a plasma pistol, all to draw back his cloak, of course, to strike an impressive pose, one of confidence. He responded, "The gods are great. They provide to those who know their songs how best to show them gratitude." Still, this Hexamon did not stop, did not slow. The apostle could not help himself, aghast, shocked. He instinctively took one step back as Hexamon of the Emperor's children stepped to his very stage, looking him deep in the eye. The apostle knew this was a mistake. He should have attacked when the miscreant had deigned to take the first ascending step. But those eyes, pupils as those of a snake, slits of black within deep purple irises. Yes, this Hexamon was beloved of the Prince of Pleasure. How? So few had the full glory of the gods manifested in them, even after the Siege of Terra, even after seeing what their Primarch had become. This Hexamon had obviously been an adherent of the Dark Powers long before the siege. Of this the apostle was now certain. And Hexamon hissed, "More than enough to share." The word-bearer would normally sneer, but instead stumbled back another pace. He was in shock. The fortress shuddered under a colossal impact, and in that instant, behind this Hexamon, the Emperor's children had shattered the standoff and unleashed their bolter's fury, then drawn power swords and charnabal blades and tore into the apostle's men. The furore behind Hexamon was matched with more explosions without, and the wailing outside was no longer merely that of the slaves. The apostle leapt into action, his hands a blur of mudras, his lips, tongue, and teeth a whirlwind of incantations. Lights and power erupted from him, but were cut unceremoniously short as Hexamon made a single move. The apostle witnessed the rising power dissipate as his hands both made a slapping sound as they hit the ground. Blood gushed from the stumps at the end of his arms, and the apostle looked up at the invasion of his mouth. His tongue stopped as it was pressed down by the weight of the tip of a blade. He looked into the eyes of Hexamon, who languidly chortled, then said, "I presume you are potent to command so many of your rabble. I have no use for you, it is true, but perhaps you will make a sumptuous gift for a friend. Oh, don't worry about your standing amongst the bearers. None of your brethren will escape nor survive to tell the tale. Let's make this simple. You know what to do." The room shook again, the sound of gunfire and explosions outside echoing inside nearly as loudly as the slaughter of the word-bearers in the hall. These were the elite of the Emperor's children. The word-bearer rank and file stood no chance at all. The bleeding from the stumps already stopping due to the augmented physique of the Astartes. Slowly, carefully, so as not to slide further onto the blade in his mouth, the apostle dropped to his knees, and Hexamon let out a small sigh. Ah, good. Even if indentured, you chose life. And perhaps, if you are very good, my friend may even return your hands. But then, he is not known for being very reasonable. The Legion Wars had begun. Horus was weak. He understood nothing. Not his role, not the war, its nature. It is not one of fleets, formations, or forces. It is one of faith, and faith alone. At long last, it is time. Centuries in the making. My labyrinthine schemes hang low. I can practically feel the pressure on the branches, pulled down by their pregnant, ripened potential. I have plucked some of late. Catspaw sinners, scum and villains. I prepare a banquet of sorrows to complement a celebration so sweet, a victory so complete. No, I cannot even think it. Not here. As above, so below. As within, so without. I must maintain my mask, even in my own soul. Thus I regain my lauded control. Now, it is time to reap the harvest. Now, it is time to set all in motion. Now, it is time to unleash the commotion. My minions arrayed, the cardinal only one for shoal of catch. All of my worms burrow or crawl toward my destination, aptly coined, for that place is indeed my destiny. I have served the four, each and as one. But where others talk, I have acted. Where others idly dream, I have enacted. Block by block, lie by lie, deed by deed, soul by soul, I have built my sepulchre of silence while speaking. I filled a board on which to play out the preordained brutal ballet. I walk to the mystic mirror and swoon at my own comeliness. Then I slam my clenched fist into it again and again, shattering it, smashing my fists down on the shards until they are coated in 1,000 weeping nicks and cuts. Sensations merge, pain and pleasure. My red liquid flows. I lick some from my hands, tasting the bile amongst the blood, the fetid stench of pus oozing amidst the tributaries of my tribute. I laugh raucously as I place my forefinger into palm and dip it into the cupped reservoirs of red there. Then I paint. Not daubing or scrawling, but clean mathematical lines, shapes I intone in the material with my own fluids, the runes of wisdom, sigils of mystic might. The four now exalted, I pass my many circles and wards, and process up the stairs to my sanctum sanctorum, my axis mundi. I crest the last step, and the moaning begins. Throats without tongues to give word to their pain, eye sockets without orbs, yet sightless all the same. The guardians of my ritual shrine scrabble across the stones to me, imploring with gesture, heads down, the score of them cruel. My hands hang low, they kiss them and croon as I walk the lines of human wreckage, ever on to my truest shrine. I stand at my workbench of wickedness, all things prepared. An iterator's silvered taster, I nonchalantly flip into the brazier filled with many-hued flames. It shrivels as it burns, disgorging its secrets, similes, tropes, and lies into the air. Whispers surround me, infuse me. I prepare to speak the true language, the glottal tongue. Knowledge is power, and language is intent. If you speak the cant of demons, you can see inside their head. The secret riders and added insinuations. Every syllable they speak, like a flower unfolding, each petal a different foreboding. Know thy enemy, and hear their heart, for it dribbles out amongst each and every letter and word. Time to fiddle the fiddler. A grimoire opens where I deign, its fluttering pages stop upon a name. I form thought and open my mouth, transforming the conceited cogitation into conversation. My mouth moves under its own volition, as thought becomes sound, becomes power, becomes effect. I take my athame and reach behind me. My hand closes on hair. I twist and pull it round me. One of my guardians. I open its throat with one practiced slice. The red fountain sprays across the ground. None touches my altar, of course, but glyphs light across it all the same. And I speak. I command thee, liege of casual liars. I summon thee, plotter of downfalls most base. I invoke thee, Zazamanel Atrabal. The too many-hued kaleidoscopic flames twist upward from the brazier, and beyond them, within them, a form appears. 100 eyes open on wings furled around the Prince of Foolishness, perhaps the weakest of its kind. It opens its feathered limbs, and the bird-like image reveals itself, and then shifts into a star. Light flickers from it in impossible variety. It pulses as it speaks. Your life is forfeit. Your powers revoked. Your hubris I will make you choke. Booms the demon. Its 100 voices each tell another lie, reveal another truth. I hear the words truly and gain their intent. Mostly bluster, but also fear. Deploring and imploring as it feels its own defeat. I look on with limpid eyes, and I smile at it. It senses the source of my enlightenment and its possible annihilation. Where get you that tomb? I can kill you in your mother's womb, it hisses, terrified, but not of the book, not even of the knowledge contained therein, but of course, who wields it. I reach into the flames and grasp the star in my fist, delicately pulling it out. I use its own language to intone again and again. I command thee, Lord of unskilled dissemblers, plotter of petty retributions, I constrain thee, Zazamanel Atrabal. It attempts to burn my fist, but cannot break my hold. I open said fist, but I perform 100 hand mudras with the other. A cage of conceits and concepts envelops it, each line of thought containing its true name. I step backwards to bask in my art. It rails but can break through naught, the star surrounded by tentacles of my own darkness. I shall bind it to my rod another day. I am enraptured with the beauty of its brilliance. Zazamanel Atrabal joins Delacour and Botulaz. 3 down, 1 to go. And that being now the operable word, as I do, I glance at it and give another longing sigh, then turn on my heel and give the permission the others need. The guardians all pounce on the cadaver at my feet as I flick a finger in its direction. Maws and jaws bite down for rare sustenance as I process back down the stairs. I pass the doors to my outer residence and armor myself in the usual way. The insufferables who bring my warplate and panoply of war will all be burnt by end of day. I stride out of my palatial quarters. Alas, I know what I will find, of course. Seer that I am. My door guards slaughtered, a semicircle of helmless, panting Astartes now leer. The Coryphaeus gives me a gift, a warm-up before my speech. At least he has the decency to attempt to keep me on my toes. 5 of them, marines of my own host, but ones I have inadvertently or deliberately snubbed. I know them all, watched them do this in a dream, where they came from, what they carry, what grudges fill their hearts. I know it all, but that does not substantially change the situation. They are younger, do not recall my golden days before I learnt the art. I leer back at them as I drop into combat stance, inviting them on with an outstretched gesturing hand. Surprised, their eyes twinkle. They thought I am only a sorcerer. They do not know why we apostles were born. Ah, the old days, when I hid my talent so deep, even I forgot it was there. And they made a wolf into a shepherd. An apostle now, a chaplain then. I show them why we led men. The first comes at me from the left. I extend my left hand and fire the Volkite Serpenter. His head immolates, and the back of his armor explodes like molten lava. The second springs at me from the front, and I sidestep his rush. His blade crackles past me, and I kick out his leg. He sprawls. Time gained. One from right, one from left, both charge. I do not roll away. I swing my dark Crozius up with such force, the first is knocked back. The other I twist past and bury my Crozius in his skull. I twist again, never stopping, and bring it into the torso of another, its barbs piercing his warplate and collapsing his chest, crushing both his hearts. The fallen leader, who I kicked out, scrambles across the ground to escape. I shoot him in the legs, and both become pools of red-hot ceramite as he screams his last. The one remaining I dive at, slamming my Crozius at him time and again. My battle rhythm now returned. I bully him backwards until he trips, with a two-handed overhead grip. I bring down my humming, crackling croziers 6 times. Ah, the beauty of bloodshed. There is nothing much left but pate when I am done, all gone, invigorating. I march on, meeting my relief guards, staggered that their brethren were so remiss in their duty, then head to the arena. Time to address the masses and my loyal sons of truth. I appear before them all in the amphitheatre, carefully chosen to give my best performance, of course. I stand high above my people, my Sons of Truth warband, and the throngs who gather to hear my wisdom. So, let us fire their songs. Come, brothers! Come, sisters! Hearken to my words! For I am the receptacle, I am the voice of that which rules over all. From my lips to your hearts, I speak the tongue of truth alone. Only you can understand what I say. Only you can be trusted to obey. For you are the pure, the clean, the righteous, and you are the fire that burns away all lies. Prophecy unfurls. Let them mark the time when the laurels of the 500 are saved by death, when the deep woods feel the king of cat's breath, when the insatiable moor encircles the void, when the timeless liege rouses his kind, when the jester prepares his final bow, when the ghoul seer ascends the ladder now, when mystic moth and snake return, when the first sun makes the steel glove burn. Then is the time for service most righteous. Then is the time for action most bold. I do not speak the last line, of course. Then will the ways be weakest, the cage ready to be unlocked. Let us not confuse the issue, nor alert any with the wit to see. I continue. A torpor is complete. The moment has arrived. We are the girt for war. I have 100 times 100 times 100 raucous faithful under my sway. I have 13 times 13 times 13 red-plated brothers to array. I have 8 times 8 times 8 demons led to the fray. I have 7 times 7 times 7 shackled spirits to then display. I have 6 times 6 times 6 travesties to cauterize and splay. I have 5 times 5 times 5 traitors leading the enemy astray. I have 4 times 4 times 4 vessels to carry us away. I have 3 times 3 times 3 champions to fight and flay. I have 2 times 2 times 2 sorcerers to spread holy dismay. I am the 1 times 1 times 1. Upon you, blessings I pray. I am the leader, passion and purpose. I leave now, without delay. Arise, my sons of truth. Arise, my people, my proof of truth. We go to war, and we shall make the galaxy burn. They cheer and caper, blood boiling, ready for the slaughter. They will do what I say, when I say it, how I say it. They are all mine. Of course, I care not for the numbers, the fleet's forces or formations, but these are not just a gathering of disposables. Their accumulation was a sacrament, a quest, to satisfy the powers from which I wish to gain favor. And finally, I have done it. We go to meet with the armada of the Praetor of Pain, Ullik the Unreasonable. As Amanthus Emveros would say, this will be so much fun. We muster the combined forces of so many true Astartes, the ones who cowed the galaxy entire and brought it to heel. A pity that the one holding the leash was so unworthy. Now he is a sad lich, sitting atop an artifact he barely understands, leeching life and radiance from enlightened ones to feed his broken body, to maintain his shattered and overstretched soul. So we muster, ostensibly under the banner of the Unreasonable One, most beloved of the Grandfather. We shall burn the galaxy when the final word is given. Yet why am I, Zamet Heket, a true son of the great Crimson King, amongst such rabble? Especially beneath the penance of Nurgle, who is abhorred by my true lord, Tzeentch. Because of a lie, an offer, and a threat. The false one believes we need what he has to sell, that I will get down on my belly and crawl across glass to gain it. He knows that we yearn for the location of the Elder Repository of Knowledge, their Black Library. But now, we do not. But we do not wish him or his master, masters, to know this. The Dark Council play at the great game as much as their father. The stooge walks as herald to the Unreasonable One. He gathers all to the crusade. Yet, is he truly working for his acknowledged master, the Dark Council of the Bearers of the Word, or for himself? A savory conundrum to me, a tapestry of intent I mean to unravel thread by thread. So I play my part, the willing dupe. I feign indignance at the merest mention of the errant son of the Crimson King. This word-bearer sorcerer is not petty or mean. He is powerful, but his wiles outstrip his knowledge. His plans are solid, but not quicksilver. For he worships the great deceiver, but not to the exclusion of all others. Hence, we are the greater spiders, for we serve only he, the Lord of Lies, plots and plans. Secret knowledge is ours, not his. Despite this, he knew of our goal. He did not know that we had achieved it. That Ozek had penetrated the Black Library, knows the ways now. That Ahriman, who has welcomed back to the bosom of the king, the prodigal son returned. Yet he or they knew of our old intentions. We must discern how, and he can be cunning. Yet I can read him like a scroll. He needs my sorcerers, but he thinks he does not need me, Zamet Heket. I feel the shroud of his malice closing around me, even here on my own ship. I strive for the moment of its realization. I set a trap for the hunters. I walk without my Sekhmet guard, alone to display my unshakable confidence. Striding to the bridge, I crossed the expansive hall that would have been a cathedral if we were on a ship dedicated to the corpse god. Here there are the shrines of our forebears, the tabernacle dedicated to Tzeentch, expanses wide enough to carry our words into the warp, space enough to perform our highest rites in his name. And now it happens. Let us see what he has got. A snap resounds, echoing off every arch and bulkhead, declaring the beginning of the trial. Bolts tear through reality at me, and he would have slain me instantly, of course. I can smell the glyphs and wards on them as they hit the ground, rebounding off my invisible guards. I can tell that these bolts would have punctured my usual wards with ease, sliced through my soul and armor, as if they were forged of soup. Then I feel the all-too-familiar squall of energies as a rent is torn in reality. An outpour a cadre of enraged marines. The stench of blood rises, a wave of malice and fury crashes over me at their onset. There is no point in even attempting to read that which they do not have, a mind. I stop and smirk. Raising my hands high, I unravel the threads of my dreamers, and before me, around me, are my actual bodyguards. One is slightly damaged by the initial shots, but it stands firm as I flick my finger and its metals reform. I have 8 of them. Adding myself, this is the holy 9, one of the many numbers of my lord, but is most potent. I unleash a prayer and power, and a silent killer is sent to hunt down the assassin who assails me from range. It will find its soul and consume its heart. I need fear no more ranged attacks, but stand behind my bodyguards anyway. There is no reason to risk my bright and dripping soul, merely for show. There they stand, 4 before me, 1 at either side, 2 behind. Secretary robots. They unleash their firepower into oncoming raging maniacs. Hellfire missile racks unload, and their ire strikes true. 5 of the berserkers are punched off their feet, their armor pierced by the missiles. Then a mystic flame consumes them from within. All that remains of them is the smoke coming from their armor. The mindless marauders come on. One of my sectors steps forward and fills the air before us with warp flame, consuming 2 more of the foe. Pyreflux melter shots come from the rest of my guards, bringing down more of them, their chests and heads, arms and legs, burnt off by the shots. Some still drag themselves forward by their chain axes. A mere 3 of the brutes reach our lines, slamming into the metallic wardens. They are faster, more furious, masters of the art of butchery. But my guard rise to the challenge. Their movements more smooth, matching the foe's speed as the threat to my person escalates. I could walk away, could tear my own escape into the warp, could erase these scum with a wave of a hand. But I do not. I revel in the activity of my guards, savor every second of it, knowing full well that he watches it all unfold. The last of the berserkers is slain by the power claws of my sector robots. Then they fall back and cover me from every angle, waiting. Good dogs. We hear the scream come from the first assassin as his heart explodes. Nothing more. Was that it? Was that it? Pathetic. He used the blood-soaked madman to throw me off the scent. As they are defeated, their nails go into overdrive, eviscerating their brains. Their souls go to corn. So I gain no proof of anything but an attempt on my life. But these warriors were not from the host of the 12th Legion, so they all but confirmed the genesis of the attack. Sarvak the Butcher is no target for me, nor me for he. It was the bearer of the word. Nothing is more certain. Not bad. Perhaps, if I had truly been alone, he might have achieved his goal. Might. Of course, I shall have to retort. Perhaps I should send some of my Sekatar to his ship to introduce themselves. But then, even the unreasonable one would have to censure me for such a blatant assault. So, how to do it? How to gain my revenge? An exciting dish to prepare. One I will mull over in the days to come. Word bearer, you will rue the day you met me. So swears Zamet Hak.